Okay, looks like it's finally live. At least that's what the software is saying. That was really weird. Really, really weird. I hit the button over a minute ago. It was unresponsive. The software was unresponsive for almost 2 minutes. Very, very weird. People are going to complain that I'm telling you this. People are also going to complain that my last short video a couple hours ago was immediately demonetized. People are going to complain that my China bailout video from 2 days ago was also immediately demonetized. And then it said I got limited ads, but no money is going into my pocket. The money is going right to Google. And unfortunately, I did protest manual review, and that was denied ad revenue as well. So it looks like all of my China coronavirus videos are going to be demonetized. I have to ask Chris Martinson if that's happening to him. I sent him an email. Anyway, you guys want the content. So, in the last 24 hours, even more intervention by the Chinese government, by the People's Bank of China, and massive amounts of liquidity injections, as I talked about in the short video a couple hours ago. Another $171 billion approximately, which is 1.2 trillion Chinese yuan of liquidity injections. Not only that, China also banned short selling, and on top of that also, they also told large institutional long-only institutional shareholders, which trade large blocks of China A shares, people like Mark Yusko, hedge fund manager, and others, like the people, Stansberry people that are running those stupid China advertising videos, the Stansberry research people, how well China's doing, that they cannot sell their large blocks of shares for at least 6 months. And on top of this, in spite of this, the Chinese stock market still tumbled. A lot of bad things happening in China. I literally just got a message from my top China source in Wuhan. He has lived there a long time. I've been speaking with him for a year. He called the problems in the Asian swine flu 2 or 3 months ahead of the news stories that were coming out, and he just said that there's 7 crematoriums running outside of Wuhan. From what he's heard, those were built before the hospitals. Crazy stuff. Now, we can only speculate on the numbers, but that's what I was just told literally 5 minutes ago. 7 crematoriums running that were built first, running nonstop outside of Wuhan. So let me talk about the markets, because that's just easier than dealing with this. This video will probably be demonetized since I discuss coronavirus, and all the China trolls that monitor my YouTube channel will send reports to Google and YouTube, making sure I don't make any money off this. Thank you very much to my Patreon account contributors, though. So the oil markets tanked. The Saudis intervened. Is it going to be enough? Probably not. The oil, we're still evidence, and I've talked about this for the last 5 or 6 months, and yes, there was a nice oil rally for about 2 or 3 weeks. There was a nice little pop, and a lot of these oil producers hedged. But we're still in an oil bear market, and the oil prices here for the shale oil producers that did not hedge their oil production a couple weeks ago, when oil prices were, WTI was above 60 at $63 a barrel. Here we are, we're below 50 again. We're at $49.89 a barrel WTI. Brent crude's at $54.45, and oil is looking like it's threatening to go lower. The real data, some of the data we're actually getting out of the Chinese economy, and the GDP growth is probably, according to Tony Nash, who I interviewed in the last 2 months, he's a good China expert, and Leland Miller, CEO of China Beige Book, China's phony Q1 2020 GDP is still going to print around 6% GDP growth. Maybe, according to Tony Nash and Leland Miller on Twitter, maybe they will drop the GDP by 40 or 50 basis points, but that's about it, in spite of all the craziness. But there's a lot of projections out there that with the travel bans and the lack of 10 cities on lockdown, basically martial law, and 45 million people that are not really allowed to leave the cities, they're not allowed to go travel to another city in the travel bans, that the amount of oil usage is collapsing. On top of that, Danielle DiMartino Booth and Shy Girl on Twitter, they were discussing stories that China now cannot meet its obligations to buy LNG. They were talking about reneging on LNG import contracts that they already have. And today also, in less than 3 weeks, China is also begging President Trump for concessions on the Phase 1 trade deal. They are talking today about how they're not going to be able to meet their obligations. So lots of China news coming out, and people are like, well, why are you talking about the oil market if you're talking about China? And this is because the demand falling in China will affect oil prices, and the last thing these shale producers need, who are not hedged at higher oil prices, is a lower oil price. They already have over-leveraged balance sheets. They cannot raise enough capital now to meet a lot of their demands for growth. In spite of that, they're maxing out the amount of oil production. You're not going to see any oil production cut. For shale oil producers, they're going to produce as much as they can until the day or two they go bankrupt. They're going to run this thing into the ground, trying to hope oil prices turn around. You're not going to see any of the shale producers with bad balance sheets cut oil production. They can't. They need that revenue, and they need to hope and pray that oil prices will turn around. Maybe the Saudis will cut even more than they were suggesting today. There was a big short squeeze in Tesla. Looks like a hedge fund blew up. One of the larger hedge funds probably was worried about quarterly returns and closed out their shorts. That's my opinion. Okay, also let me talk about the 10-year U.S. Treasury. It looks like the dollar index is staying fairly strong. The dollar index is still above 97. It's almost back to 98 again. It's at 97.81. The VIX is actually up quite a bit in the last couple weeks. But what is also very interesting is the yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury. I think that's money over the last couple weeks with the coronavirus, almost timed perfectly with the news stories getting worse and worse out of the Chinese economy and the coronavirus, that the yields on the 10-year U.S. Treasury on January 8th, the yields were at 1.87, and here we are, less than a month later, almost a month, the yields are down to 1.52. That is significant. That means money is going into safe havens. So some of the real data out on the Chinese economy, this is from Caixin Global. They cover the Chinese economy fairly extensively. The article came out a couple days ago. Coronavirus cost China's service sector $144 billion in only a week. So China's real economy is getting hurt. China's economic data, which is totally divorced from their real economy, will not reflect this. And then also one more story before I let you guys go in this short little update. We have from David Kinteri, who's reporting that the USDA has said that China has not met any of its obligations yet and bought any soybeans from American farmers. So we have China is not able to meet their oil demand in China has dropped a lot. We don't know exactly how much. We don't know how long these travel bans are going to last. The last article I read on the travel bans was that they were going to be in effect for at least 2 months. So that was last week. So drop in oil demand. China has not bought any soybeans. They're already asking Trump for concessions or delays in the phase 1 trade deal. And I was very, very dicey on that. We're not even 3 weeks into the phase 1 trade deal. And China is not meeting their obligations buying LNG, the contracts. I think force majeure might have been declared for LNG contracts. China's asking for that. Let me check on that. I have Danielle DiMartino Boost Twitter up. I'm pretty sure a couple hours ago she said that. I don't know. She tweets so much, it's tough to find everything. Okay. This is why you can't do it when you're doing a live stream show. Can't find it right off the top of my head. Well, just scrolling. I know it was said. Her and Shy Girl were discussing this. Tracy Schuchart. She's now she's done interviews for Macro Voices. I think she just did a Real Vision TV roundtable on the oil market. She's bearish oil. She thinks there's going to be a lot of bankruptcies over the next 2 or 3 years. And I think she just wrote some guest articles for Raoul Pal's Global Macro Hedge Fund newsletter. Yeah, I can't find the tweet right now. China Beige Book said, best case says, this was a tweet from yesterday, best case scenario, assuming epidemic can be contained by April, China's GDP will slow to 5.4%. Worst case scenario, 2020 growth could slow to 5%. You've been in China too long when your best worst case range for a viral outbreak that's killing God knows how many people, and the amount infected, I don't believe, is only 40 basis point change in GDP. Another tweet from China Beige Book yesterday, quoting a Bloomberg article, at least 2/3 of China's economy will be closed for at least the next week. Quote, 14 provinces and cities comprising 69% of China's 2019 GDP will not allow companies to start operations until at least the second week of February. Now, we did have the Chinese New Year, and that some of those were celebrations were extended, but this is very, very serious. The 14 represent 78%. The 14 provinces and cities represent 78% of exports, 90% of copper smelting, 60+% of steel production, 65+% of crude oil refining, and 40+% of coal output. That is very significant. So in spite of government intervention with these massive amounts of liquidity injections that the People's Bank of China announced, another $171 billion or 1.2 trillion yuan, and the ban on short sellers, and the ban on long-only large blocks of institutional investors selling China A shares, not shorting, just selling China A shares, the Chinese stock market was starting to reflect some of those major issues with their real economy and pricing in looks like a bear market. We'll see what more interventions the Chinese government and the People's Bank of China have planned. And meanwhile, on top of this, the U.S. stock market, let me pull up some charts here. U.S. stock market wasn't really super affected. The NASDAQ is still well above 9,000. The Dow ended up a little above flat, considering how bad things were looking yesterday. Gold barely moved. And the S&P 500 barely moved. So oil got killed again. Not looking good for oil. And this is only going to exacerbate the problems with the oil companies that have too much debt and too high of production costs and did not hedge their oil production. Hey, free Zero Hedge. It's totally not fair what happened to Zero Hedge on Twitter. Got a super chat. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. Also, I was thinking about this. I was doing some research on this. For behind the Patreon account paywall, I have a Super Bowl themed idea for a really good IPO. It looks like there's going to be a new IPO for a legitimately good business in 2020. Give more details behind the paywall. But it looks like this company has a lot of good growth prospects, and they're going to have good margins, and they have a lot of cash on the balance sheet, and they're going to be consistently profitable. And I'll talk about why. So that'll be a teaser for you guys who are already Patreon account contributors. The people stuck with me almost to 250. It was to 248 or 49, 248 or 249 a few days ago. And then I think like their credit card or debit card companies canceled. It is what it is. It happens every month. But if YouTube's going to demonetize all my China videos, either I don't cover the China videos here, so my channel, because if I'm going to spend the time doing videos like the China bailout video and then not make any money from it, even though it gets like 7,000 views, because that would have been like probably $150, $200 in my pocket just for that one video. So either I have to decide what I'm going to do then, because if I'm going to spend that much time making videos and not get a cent from it, if YouTube puts it on limited ads and then they take all the ad revenue and I get none, either I put that content in a video behind the Patreon account paywall or I don't make it at all. Oh, I do take Bitcoin and Litecoin. The address will be in the information and description section. I take the top 6 cryptos, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum. My address, wallet addresses will be in the video information and description section along with my Patreon account. After the video's over, you'll be able to see it about 10 minutes later. Guys, the live stream show, I hit the button. I don't know. This has not happened before. The live stream, I hit the start streaming button, and it did not accept it. There was a software problem. It's like it was being blocked because of my China title. It did not start for about 2 minutes. $5 a month. You can start with Patreon. So hopefully I will have that analysis of the new top IPO for 2020 done hopefully in the next week. Rob says he just watched that video and got an ad for Tide. Then Rob, Google and YouTube are taking all the ad revenue. It says I'm getting none and I just protested it. So if that's for the China bailout video, it says it's limited or no ads for me, which means the ads are running. I'm hearing from other people the ads are running. I'm not getting any of it. I have the yellow thing, and they already did I already manually protested, and they already... Not manually protested. I already protested, and they did a manual review and said I won't get any ads. I have a screenshot of the email that they sent back last night, and I put it on my Twitter. So it looks like YouTube, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and the mainstream media, although there's some decent coverage in the mainstream media, are all in the corner of the Chinese government helping them control the narrative. Yeah, they all... PayPal, Patreon, there's problems with them all. Okay, well, that's pretty much it for this short little update. I want to thank everyone for listening so I can and thank you very much to my over 200, almost 250 Patreon account contributors, and it's over 250 when you add in the Patreon and PayPal contributors, and people throw me a tip once in a while. It's much appreciated so I can focus on unique content, research, information, analysis, and financial education. But the Chinese GDP data is not going to reflect at all what is really happening in China. And the news coverage of what's really happening in China, I think a lot of it's being censored. We're not going to get the truth about it. It's really sad. And it seems that the Google and YouTube employees are in on it. These are highly paid people making a lot of the regular employees are making 6 to 7 figures a year with stock options and other perks. And they care more about the Chinese government than they do most Americans. Welcome to dystopia.